It's such a tradition here at LTA to do a Christmas Carol, and so thinking even during a time of COVID of not doing a Christmas Carol, it was almost not even an option, but finding the right version of the Christmas Carol and being able to generate some excitement in the city for our version of a Christmas Carol. We didn't know what we were going to find. We didn't know how we were going to find it. We read a lot of scripts. And ultimately, we turned to the person that we thought knew a Christmas Carol better than anyone. That's Mike Baker. It's funny, when we started pursuing an idea of live theater, probably back in May, I put together a plan that called for limited live theater. The idea behind it was not to make money. We're losing money hand over fist right now. It was to make sure people remembered what live theater was about, so that one day when we're not dealing with COVID, people will come back. So we wanted people to feel safe coming back to the theater, and for a time when we know COVID will have passed, we want people to feel comfortable in the theater. I don't think any of us dreamed at the time when we started to put together this small theater for unusual times that we would be doing something with Christmas Carol that was groundbreaking. We just wanted to get something up on stage, and now we find ourselves about to do something that no other theater is doing. And it's really exciting and incredibly gratifying and a lot of hard work. But we just could not have even conceived of this back in May and June when we were putting this together. And I am so excited and so proud. I'm so proud of LTA for doing this, and grateful to Mike and to Ira and to Charlotte and all of the people involved for helping us make it come to life.
Well, this has been a truly interesting experience for me. It's my first time producing. I was originally scheduled to produce a live Christmas Carol performance, which was we were not able to proceed with because of the coronavirus epidemic. And then I was asked to help co-produce a show that was going to be quite different from any other that had been done before, melding together virtual aspects, digital background, scenery, and some live acting as well. It's been a really interesting educational experience for me. I didn't know what I was getting into, and maybe I still don't, but it's been very rewarding, especially working with tremendous co-producers, Mike as director, and a really expert crew, and a fantastically talented cast. It's been a real privilege. Well, I'm really thankful that the theater, through the board, decided to try their best to be able to continue live community theater despite the challenges that we all face at this time. And it's been extremely successful and really appreciated throughout our small theater program, and Christmas Carol is a slight step up in terms of the number of people involved and the audience size that we're going to have. I think that I've seen it through donations and emails and calls that the theater has received, that the fact that we're doing this is very much appreciated. And the fact that we're doing it in a truly safe and careful manner to protect the health of our patrons, our actors, our crew, our staff, and our volunteers is very much appreciated. So we've really reached a point, I think, where we're really, truly unique among community theater in this area and perhaps in the country.
I had a dual role in this, and not only in directing a theater production, but directing a television production and somehow intermingling the two. And then to be blessed with playing the character of Scrooge and having to literally interface with a virtual character live on stage, that has never been done before. I think the most fascinating thing to me was to talk to the theater people, and I'll talk about Little Theatre in a minute. Talk to the theater people and try to explain what I wanted to do, and they would nod their head and say, okay, but I could tell they didn't clearly understand. But then what was more remarkable, the lighting crew and assistant director of photography who work on House of Cards and Walking Dead, explaining to them what I was doing, they had no clue either. So, and nobody, even in New York, could fathom trying to put these live elements together. But COVID did it. And I'm blessed to work at the Little Theatre of Alexandria. I've been here 37 years. And the fact that they had the confidence in me to put these disparate things together into a production is a true blessing in my life. If I've always looked for something nobody's ever done before, and this definitely represents one of those things. In terms of the character, Scrooge, I have been blessed to have played him not only in the straight play but also the musical. The musical was a bear. The straight play is a fascinating play because you don't have music to convey that transformation from a crotchety old miser into somebody who is actually reborn on Christmas morning. He talks about being a baby and he says, oh, never mind, I'd rather be a baby. To me, that's fascinating, that kind of character and that kind of transformation. But one thing you did hear earlier, and that is what you see in young Scrooge, from a very loving person to a miserly person, that is actually in reverse order later in the show, as Scrooge is the miser and then becomes that loving individual at the end and opens up the world and opens up the coffers for everybody to give.
It's been very interesting because we've never done it before, and I've never done it before, and that's one reason I agreed when you asked me to be stage manager. I agreed to do it because it would be something new, a learning experience, not only for me, but for the theater. And I thought that would be exciting, and it has been. Well, the challenges, of course, first of all, is the integration of video into live action. That's very clearly and obviously the challenge that we all have to face because it's new and we've not done it before. But and I think it's also the challenge is we don't exactly know where we're going or how we're going to get there. So it's exciting and interesting along the way to explore that and as you have said, be successful at it, which I'm sure we will be. We have a tremendous amount of talent involved in the production, some really good actors, a really good crew, and I know the end result will be good because it's new and creative.
As music director, this was a particularly challenging process, mostly because most of the rehearsals early on were on Zoom. And anyone who's used Zoom or any other video conference tools knows that there's some sort of latency and delay. If I was trying to synchronize myself with the singer, we would usually be out of sync, out of whack, which obviously for music is not ideal. But I have to give all the credit to the singers. They came in fully prepared. We had one rehearsal before we filmed, and I was expecting to have to go over the notes, go over the rhythms, really the nitpick stuff, but they came in, they were ready to go. We ran through each song like 2 or 3 times, and then they were ready to film. So even though there was a challenge with the latency and there was a challenge overall with the Zoom rehearsals, they really stepped up to the plate, and I'm really, really happy with the finished product.
Costuming Christmas Carol this year was different. Doing a virtual Christmas Carol was challenging because besides your normal issues of fitting garment to characters that were totally different size last year, there were the issues of using the green screen and not being able to use anything green. And it's amazing how many fabrics have green in them, even though you don't think of them as being green when you look at them. Was one of our issues. We were all the time going, wait a minute, there's green in that plaid, or there's some green threads in this calico. And calico has lots of little green leaves in it. And that eliminated a number of garments we would have normally used. The sizing issue comes about every year. We had to make some costumes that we normally wouldn't have had to have made, simply because the actor this year couldn't wear the ones from previous years. But that happens every year with Christmas Carol. The other real issue, though, was being able to actually measure and then get the actors into their costumes to see if they fit or they work. Your measurements can only tell you so much about whether or not a garment's going to fit someone. It's how it works once you get the body in it. And that was difficult to get the bodies in the garments that we had selected, or the range of garments we had selected for them, just simply because with the COVID issues, the actors weren't here. They were on Zoom. But we managed, although there were a few things that showed up when it came time for filming that we'd never really seen on the bodies before. It was interesting to see how they looked. We had no idea. So those were our major issues. It was interesting to see the differences in interactions, because we do take that into account when we're putting together costumes. The colors we have to make sure go with each other. We don't want people clashing up there. This sort of thing, and it was just hard to visualize because we do a lot of visualize in our heads, and it was harder to visualize since we'd never been through this process before.
So I am the hair designer for A Christmas Carol, which means that I had the pleasure of designing the wigs and the different hairstyles for the different characters. And so quite an undertaking because we had a number of different characters or different actors that were playing multiple characters. And so we had to put some in wigs and some different hairstyles throughout the day. I think one of the funnest parts was getting to put a bunch of the male actors in wigs who had never worn wigs before, and kind of seeing that transformation of them go from one character to another. So as we were working through it, we had to figure out how to make it all come together. And without having the traditional access of being able to see it all through Tech Week, we had to really rely on the research that we had done, making sure that we understood what was going on during the time period and the time that the actors would be portraying. And then also had to have a lot of conversations with our fellow designers just to make sure that we understood each other's vision and that the parts that we would put together would work with the parts that the other designers would put together.
It was wonderful having the opportunity to help set the audio levels. After I had set the audio levels, David put on my earphones and he heard things that I could not hear. He could hear people talking outside. He could hear people talking in the front hall of LTA, and so we had to redo the shoot. But it was a thrilling endeavor. And then I had the opportunity to clean off, sterilize all the mic, the wires, and the transmitter, and give it to David, and he'd suit up the next victim.
Well, I'm the makeup designer, It was really fun to be a part of this project. It was super unique. I've never done anything like it before. It was definitely my first time using prosthetics, so that was a really fun challenge. And I just had a blast doing Christmas Carol, again at LTA. I think the biggest challenge was not using green and not working with the actors in person at first. So trying to teach them how to do their lighting for their makeup and which lighting to do it best, but also while doing it by my computer screen and their computer screen with the different lightings was a big challenge. And then definitely making what was filmed cohesive with what was on stage was probably the biggest piece.
I portray two characters in this terrific show. One is the gentleman, a fellow who's seeking alms to help the poor, sort of the basic structure of the whole story here. And he's rebuffed by Scrooge, of course. And then, happily, I get to portray Dickens himself, the author of this terrific work, which is really so powerful. After more than 170 years, it is still talking to us today. I think everyone will recognize it, but of course, in this particular case, our director, Mike Baker, has used, by and large, almost exclusively, Dickens' own words. So even though you might think when you read it, it's a little dated, I assure you when you see it, it comes across powerfully. In particular at the very beginning, when the little waif is singing, it's incredibly heartrending. And as Dickens appears on the stage, he can hardly keep it all together. I think the fun thing about this is the combination of virtual and real. In my own case, I play once in a virtual setting with Scrooge as the gentleman. And then, towards the end of the show, happily get to come back live as the same man, quite startled by the transformation that's happened with Scrooge. It's really a very touching part of the whole story, I think. As Dickens, the really cool thing about this is to be able to portray a man who wrote a story when he was 31 years old, in great need of money himself, and put words to paper that still ring so incredibly true today. I can remember as a little kid, literally getting under my covers with a flashlight and reading David Copperfield when I was 11 years old, and just thinking it was the most extraordinary thing, completely transporting, as in fact I think this production is on stage, happily. You know, Dickens came to America 2 times, and the first time was before A Christmas Carol was written. And he wasn't a very happy camper because in the US, copyright laws didn't exist, and his stories were being widely reproduced without any payment to him, and it really ticked him off. He left and didn't come back again for nearly 20 years, but when he did, he was a superstar, an absolute superstar. And to me, having read so many of his books, both as a kid and frankly as an adult, and having purchased my own full set of a 3rd edition copy in London and carried it back on an airplane in 1972, I can tell you Dickens is true to my heart. So true, in fact, that the bookends holding those books up are Charles Dickens bookends that came from my grandparents. My grandfather used to read us Dickens when we were little kids, I mean literally 5, 6, 7 years old. And just amazing, truly transporting language. So for me, it's fun to be the narrator as Dickens, in that you never see Dickens in the show. And here, he's standing on the stage, helping to set the scene, and it gives you a real sense of value for the kinds of elements that each scene portrays in the real, true life of well-to-do and not well-to-do in Britain in the mid-19th century.
One of the great things about Marley is that for him it's a story of redemption. He goes to Scrooge and he really is trying to warn him to not become him. And I think he does this because he does consider Scrooge a friend, but also it's also part of his redemption story, because if Scrooge can get redempted, then Marley can too. And Alibaba was a really fun role because it was kind of this phantasmical character that appeared on the shoulder of young Scrooge, and so it's a nice reference to play that as well. Yeah, I think we all have our own version of what hell is like. So it's interesting that Marley brings Scrooge to his version of what it's like, and it's, for him it's dark and it's cold and it's snowy and things like that, where personally I love those things. I'm a big fan of winter and a big fan of snow. So it's been interesting to play that up and to really play the scary, menacing parts of Marley.
So I play Belle, Mrs. Dilber, and Christmas Past. Belle is a young woman who is the wife of young Scrooge, and she is revealed through a scene that Christmas Past shows older Scrooge. And Belle is a very strong, independent, sweet, kind young woman who decides that her relationship with young Scrooge is not what she wants. And for that day and age, when a woman couldn't own things or money, it was very brave of her to make that step and that choice. And Christmas Past, there is a parallel between her and Belle. They both have such a deep love for Scrooge that they come to him to try to see his ways and make a change. I play Christmas Past as a mother and a teacher. A little reprimanding, but it's only because she sees that Scrooge can be so much more than what he is now. And my last and final role, I play Mrs. Dilber, who is a very fun character with a Cockney accent. She is the drunken housekeeper of Scrooge, and she has a fun scene with Old Joe. Yes, and I think that she is also a very strong woman in this show as well. She knows what she wants. She needs to get day by day, and so she will go to great lengths to get what she needs and to survive. What entered my mind as we were figuring out green screen but also making it theatrical was a big trust factor. So things behind me that I couldn't see, or just one prop in the middle. I have to trust Mike, our wonderful director, to help us and to guide us, to see what looks well, or if I need to tilt my head 1 more inch, or if my eyes are wandering too far from the camera, because in theater you have this wide space and you have to act to the back of the house, that last seat that holds a person. But when you have film right in front of your face, you need to narrow your gaze. So that was one of the big transitions for me when I was approaching my characters.
So I play the role of the Ghost of Christmas Present. I also play the role of Carolyn. One of my other roles is the rag picker soloist at the beginning of the show. And I play another character at the end of the show who is the singer on Christmas morning, who is essentially the same woman, but in a different situation. I thoroughly enjoyed all of these roles, especially the Ghost of Christmas Present, so I'll start with her. The Ghost of Christmas Present is everything. She represents I think a very special Christmas for many of us, because it's this Christmas and this holiday season of this year, which has been a very challenging year for so many of us. And the Ghost of Christmas Present is really kind of putting Scrooge in his place a little bit, I think. She starts out by saying, "You don't know me." And to me, that's a very powerful way that she enters the show, because she is, saying like, "This is me. I am Christmas. How do you not know who I am? How do you not know about me?" And so going into this role, I felt very much like she was the Mother Earth. Christmas Present represents Mother Earth. She is the symbol of all that is good about this holiday season. And for me, it's very special to have the opportunity to portray the Ghost of Christmas Present, because she reminds us about the power of being present. and being intentional about appreciating what we have here in front of us. And so I really enjoyed playing her. Carolyn, another very, very special character close to my heart, is in a scene where she is talking to her husband about money that they owe to Scrooge. And she has a small baby. She and her husband are struggling. Also very, very connected to this time that we're in right now, where many people are, just struggling to make ends meet, and that is Carolyn and her husband. And for her, I had to reach into this place of despair, this place of just kind of not knowing, how you're going to get your next meal. And again, I think that's so very representative of what so many people are going through right now. And so I really enjoyed playing Carolyn. The two solo pieces that I had in the show are the woman at the beginning of the show who sings Silent Night, and she's begging on the street. And in that song, I definitely wanted to portray hopelessness and desperation. At the end, she kind of makes this gesture to Scrooge where she ends the song, and she's hoping that he will give her some money, and it's a very somber moment. At the end of the show, this soloist who sings at the beginning, Silent Night, comes back at the end of the show, and she sings Ding Dong Merrily on High, and it is a jubilant, rejoiceful moment in the show. It's because Scrooge is waking up on Christmas morning to realize that he's alive and that he now has the opportunity to go and do good and be a different person. And he's learned from all of his mistakes. And it is probably one of my favorite moments in the show, actually, when she wakes him up with this really beautiful, happy Christmas carol.
I actually play 3 roles in Christmas Carol. The main role, of course, is Fezziwig, who is Scrooge's boss from the past. A pretty pivotal role in understanding Scrooge as a character, who he was, who he became. The other role is the haberdasherer in the opening scene. He is somebody who owes Scrooge money, and we get to see the interaction and understand who Scrooge has become. And the third role is a minister in the future, and we see what may become of Scrooge if he doesn't change his ways. All of these are very important to understanding Christmas Carol, which is about this man who needs redemption, this man who has hardened his heart. And this story, which I love so much because it is the ultimate story of redemption of a man, which is what Christmas is all about.
I play 3 roles in the play. The first role is of the baker who owes money to Scrooge and really doesn't want to pay him. That's a very quick role, and that goes then into the headmaster who is with young Scrooge in the school. He's a bit more complicated, and he's got some ideas, but he's a very stuffy man. So I try to play him as a stuffy character. But he has a good heart, and he wants to take care of young Mr. Scrooge. And then the last role, which is my favorite, is Old Joe, the pawnbroker. He has a power relationship with Mrs. Dilber, who is a young and up-and-coming, well, drunken thief. And she gets the better of the day in that scene. It's a great set of roles, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it's just it's a lovely explanation to help try to set up Scrooge as a sympathetic character and see the redemption to come. It was a fantastic, extreme change from going from live theater to going to film theater. I was stunned at how much time it took to set up the lighting, to get the perfect draft of darkness on one shoulder, a little bit of light on the other shoulder. We took a lot of time to get 30 seconds out of the camera, but it really paid off. In those moments as an actor, I just invented the scene around me, and it was all in my head, and I was just part of the scene, which is very different than live theater, because in live theater, of course, you have the other actors around you, you can play off them. But it was very exciting. There was one scene in Old Joe where there are two of us on stage together, and that worked out very well. Mrs. Dilbert and myself truly enjoyed playing off of each other, but we were also playing in the camera. We were in a scene we couldn't see, so we had to imagine that. It was quite exciting.
My roles. 1, ragamuffin. It's basically just a person that's on the street singing. It's a spirit. He's dirt poor, and I think he's just like hoping for somebody to help him. And then there's Boy Scrooge. Boy Scrooge is basically this lonely little character who only has 2 books to keep him company. He gets really excited when the headmaster tells him that Fan is coming to get him, and then it turns out kind of happy for him. Turkey Boy, well, this guy is just bringing happiness to everyone. I mean, he's gotten asked to bring a turkey to a person for half a crown. He's probably poor as well, probably just a street boy going to get errands. I mean, maybe he's just like dirt poor as well as ragamuffin, but, and then it's like Turkey Boy just gets asked for half a crown for a turkey.
When we first started rehearsing over Zoom, it was really sort of a stiff process of getting the lines down, working on the accent, and just figuring out timing of when we're coming in and out. Once we got into the rehearsal room, we only really had 2 days in there, so once we had all the lines down, it was finally time to just start acting. And it was so interesting to actually be back in the room with another actor, get to play off of them. So the first scene of young Scrooge asking for Belle's hand in marriage comes right after, when he's working with Fezziwig, and you see a hint of this addiction to working or feeling the need that he needs to, put in the time to start making money, start supporting himself. And then Fezziwig is there to remind him, hey, this is a party, it's Christmas Eve, let's stop working, it's time to celebrate. So he puts the work away and finds love in Belle. And he takes this moment to express all of his feelings, all of the love that she brings to him. And then immediately after that, we see young Scrooge a few months, possibly a couple years later, when he's working in his office, again on Christmas Eve. And Belle comes in to try and, pull him away from his work, and he can't. He's sort of glued to his desk and to his work. And there's that transformation of feeling the need. It's not that he doesn't love her anymore, but he's found a new, she even says in the script, a new idol has replaced me. And he's fixated on needing to grow out of his poverty that he's lived his entire life. And he finally has an opportunity to do that. And he's feeling like Belle is getting in the way. And as the play goes on, as you see Scrooge as an older man, his bitterness, his bah humbugness, you kind of see that where that starts to happen as young Scrooge breaking up with the love of his life and deciding he needs to go another route and pursue his career. Playing a younger version of Scrooge, you get to play both sides of the coin of, having this tender, loving moment, and then all of a sudden now he's this bitter old man. And the actor playing Scrooge also has to reflect on the tenderness that you see in the early days of young Scrooge, and you have to realize that, there is that side of him deep down inside somewhere, and the ghosts really try their best to pull it out of him, and you get to see that transformation back again, sort of the reverse of what I'm doing as young Scrooge, again later as an old man. This is the first real experience I've ever had with film, specifically with green screen. On stage in the world of theater, you get props, you get set, you get lighting, you get your costume, you get to envelop yourself into that world. And what we did here is, I was in the changing room, I got into a costume, I walked down one floor, and now I'm in this sea of green with a camera and lights in my face, and it's a different approach to getting into that world, especially as the character. And luckily I had a scene partner to work off of, but the internal world as an actor, you really have to adjust. You kind of have to, again, you got to use your imagination. And so coming from a theater background and all my training, I really had to adjust to this new medium.
For this show, I play 3 characters. I play Fred Scrooge, the nephew of Ebenezer. I also play Robin Crusoe, and I play the Ghost of Christmas Future. And they're all linked by sort of a common theme: judgment and redemption. Fred Scrooge is usually a pretty one-dimensional character. He's sort of an interesting brute force optimism sort of guy, and he comes in as an interesting dichotomy between Scrooge's stubborn, almost pessimism, and the fact that he's one of the first main characters that Scrooge interacts with is very telling about both Scrooge and his relationship to Fred. Fred's a man of relative wealth and privilege, so although you get the sense that he's very optimistic, he knows he's been given a lot of money by his uncle, which sort of tells you something about their 2 love languages. Scrooge values money, and Fred values people, and he's just trying to get Scrooge to come over to the other side. Robin Crusoe I always thought was pretty interesting. It's in the text originally. The book upon which that character is based is from the 1700s, and although he's looked at as a hero usually, his depiction in the play is sort of this war-torn, scraggly, ravaged, almost shipwrecked pirate of a character. And so the dichotomy between the mysticism of Alibaba and the I've seen some stuff desperation of Robin Crusoe sort of has a lasting impact, I think, on Scrooge as he grows up. And then finally, the Ghost of Christmas Future. If Fred was optimistic and trying to get Scrooge to change, there is no such optimism left in the Ghost of Christmas Future. He knows this is Scrooge's last chance. And he's probably been doing this arbiter role for centuries. So any compassion he has left in his body has long left. And there's nothing he could say that images and depictions of what his future could be like wouldn't describe better.
So Ethan's kind of this, Ethan and Caroline are both, down and out, and they're really, I think, really well representative of kind of what's going on in the world right now, especially, all over the world. I was going to say in the United States, but of course this is a global pandemic. So, I think a lot of people are struggling right now, and I think that Ethan and Caroline in particular, along with the Cratchits, do a really good job of representing that, blue-collar background, but the people who are kind of down and out right now and struggling. And it was a lot of, it was interesting trying to get into the head of Ethan, and it was, it wasn't all that difficult because we see a lot of that around us right now. So, it definitely had its unique challenges, I think, the character and the role, but it was. I think it's something that's going to come through pretty good once the final product is put together. So I really enjoyed playing the character. Really enjoyed it. I was impressed by the entire setup, and I heard from some of the other actors that this is such a unique and special kind of way in which we're doing things here, and like just to undertake something like this, that challenging is commendable in itself. So for me it was really cool. Really enjoyed the entire thing from start to finish, all the rehearsals going into it, and I'm excited to see what the final product's going to look like because it's such a unique production in itself. So.